Thank you. Let me get in front of the podium here because I was told I have to stay here. Can't go out of the spotlight or I will be in trouble. So we're here tonight to talk about that red line that's going across the globe that is just coincidentally labeled north 50 degrees. That's not the name of the flight. That just happens to be the north latitude line that we flew across most of the flight. And that was a coincidence, total coincidence. But what I'd like to do tonight is answer some questions that people have been asking me since the flight happened, and to also take you guys a little bit behind the scenes on stuff that you may not have seen on social media. I presume that the reason you're here is because of social media, but we're going to try and give you a little bit more than just the social media today. So the first question that I have been asked frequently is just what was the origin of this project and what was kind of the calendar for it. And there's actually two separate calendars. And before that, let me do one thing before I do that. I would like to thank Nan Masland, who is the director of the Balloon Museum, for giving us this facility for the event tonight. This is very unusual. Almost forgot to do that. Also, I'd like to thank Quad A for giving us this opportunity. And Nan, I don't know if you can make use of this or not, but this is a sandbag that actually went across the Atlantic. And I'm willing to certify that it really was on board. And the way you can tell it was on board is because the load line, the support line is caught, and I'll go into that a little bit more a little bit later. But if you can find a place to put that in a museum, you're more than welcome to it.
Well, thank you. As long as you're willing to fill out a donor form.
There's always the paperwork that's got to be done. Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome. So my talk tonight is primarily going to start on June 1st, which really was just last month. It's hard to believe that. But that was Monday when we got the green light to proceed. However, there was a whole separate calendar that is primarily because of Bert Pedalt. And this is kind of a really broad outline of 4 years of efforts to get this project happening. My first inclination that something might be happening, have we got a few more people? There are a few more chairs. There's one here. Anybody else have a chair available here? There's one way up in the back. So we're making this a really, truly immersive experience for you guys. What I want you guys to do is look at your neighbor on the left, your neighbor on the right, and then draw a 6-foot by 4.5-foot box around the three of you guys. And then plan on spending the next 70 hours with these three people.
Oh, no.
Got it? When this theater was initially conceived, it was supposed to be a 4D theater. The seats were supposed to rock and roll. There was supposed to be smells coming up from underneath the seats. So you really felt like you were part of the experience. Well, I think we've achieved that tonight. And if anybody else comes in, there's, I think, one more seat up there. So anyway, going back to the 4-year calendar on this project, my first inclination that something might be happening was when I got a call from Bert Pedalt in December of 1922 asking me if I would do a Gore plot. 2022, sorry. It wasn't that old, 2022. I did that in the preview also. Okay, 4 years ago, he asked me to do a Gore plot for a 90,000 cubic foot, 40 Gore gas balloon. Now this was not at all unusual. Bert, pretty much whenever he was doing a new project with a balloon that he hadn't done before, would ask me to do a Gore plot. The Gore plot is basically if you're a dressmaker, it's the pattern for the dress. It's the pattern for the balloon. It allows you to shape the gores so that when you sew it all together, it looks like what it's supposed to look like, not a special shape. The unusual part of this was that it was a 90,000 cubic foot gas balloon. That's not a big balloon on hot air standards. My little 2-passenger balloon that I fly out on the West Mesa is 90,000 cubic feet. But for a gas balloon, that's about 2.5 times larger than the typical 1,000 cubic meter gas balloon that we fly at the America's Challenge or the Gordon Bennett. So I had a feeling that something was up, but Bert didn't give me any more information, so I sent him the gore plot, and he said, thank you very much. About a month later, I was talking to Don Day, who is going to feature prominently in this discussion. He is the world's best meteorologist, hands down, and he let slip the fact that Bert had a sponsor for his project. That's all he said, but I knew what Bert's project was. Bert's project, since he's been about 12 years old, has been to do a flight across the Atlantic. So I put 2 and 2 together and came up with the fact that Bert was going to do an Atlantic flight. The fact that he had a sponsor was new. I didn't know who the sponsor was, but come next May, so this would be May of 2023, not 1923, Bert had done an amazing job of assembling an amazing team of people that actually were the seed that made this project happen. He drove 11 hours from his home in Bally, Pennsylvania, up to Presque Isle, Maine, brought the balloon with him, and spent the better part of the month of May attempting to get in the air. In 2023, they did not get in the air, but he had as co-pilot David Hempelman Adams, who is a very experienced pilot. He has actually flown across the Atlantic twice, once in a Rosier and once in a gas balloon. He didn't take off from the US, he took off from Nova Scotia, but he did make it to, I believe, Ireland. And the sponsor, who we will call Frederick at this point, he was very interested, but not a balloon pilot. So this process repeated itself in 2024, again in May, late May, early June, because our meteorologists, I'm going to say it's our meteorologists, even though I wasn't on the project at that point, had determined after a 5-year study that that was the most likely time to get good winds going across. In 2024, they did get in the air. However, Don Day was not the meteorologist on that flight, and they got a hiccup in the weather and decided to land before they went out over water. And this is a very serious decision point, obviously, for transatlantic flights, because as long as you're over land, you've got a bailout option, but as soon as you get out over the water, your options are really limited. Okay, so moving on to 2025. And by the way, 2024, I was in Presque Isle as ground crew, and I got to experience the whole process. I helped Bert inflate the balloon, and we got him in the air. About 4 o'clock in the morning, we were woken up with the fact that he was planning on landing, and it was an unhappy surprise to us. But Bert still maintained his dream, and 2025 came along. Torvig, which was the sponsor, was still sponsoring. However, David and Frederick decided that they'd had enough of the project. And it wasn't necessarily that they'd had enough of the project, it was that the scheduling was so uncertain. You were on call for up to a 2-month period at a moment's notice to jump and fly. And so about February or March of 2025, Bert, very apologetically, and you'd have to know Bert to understand this, asked me if I'd be interested in stepping in for David. And I apologize wasn't the word that I would use. That I didn't take me about 2 seconds, but to say yes. And it turns out that Frederick got replaced by David Hempelman Adams' daughter, Alicia Hempelman Adams, who is not gas rated, but is a very experienced hot air pilot. And again, this year we got in the air. But this year it wasn't a problem with the weather, at least we don't think it was. It was a problem with the balloon. The balloon refused to fly level, and gas balloons are a little bit different than hot air balloons. If gas balloon is working correctly, once you get it up to float altitude and it's flying level, you don't do anything to it. There's no burner, there's no vent. Well, there is a vent, but you don't use it. It will just fly level on its own for 4 or 5 hours at a time. And this balloon was not doing that. It was continually using ballast through the night when the sun came up, and it should have been heating the gas to expand it and give us extra lift, kind of like a possible partial hot air balloon. The balloon was still falling, and we were using ballast. So we made the very difficult decision at that point to do a landing on Prince Edward Island. And it was not a pretty landing. We were doing about 30, and we ended up in a swamp. But we all survived. say the balloon needed a goodly amount of repair work, but we had some really wonderful local folks who helped us get it all out, packed up, and our chase crew, which had been planning on heading off to Europe, did a left turn and ended up going up to Presque Isle, Maine, and they retrieved us, so we lived to fly another day. 2026, Torveg had decided that 3 times was enough for them, and Bert and I had some really serious discussions about whether or not we had had enough on this, and we decided to do one more try, this time on our own with the same flight crew. And again, we were planning on doing it from late May to early June, possibly into July if we needed to. And so what I'd like to do right now, that I've given you the 4-year summary of the plan, is I'd like to focus in on the 2026 year.
So I have to get you to take one step forward because you're drifting out of the spotlight.
Apology.
Yeah, go ahead.
I knew it was going to happen. Where's the dog chain? Okay, I'm back in. I apologize. All right. First of all, I'm going to answer a question that people have been asking me a lot. And the question is, was it really as easy as it looked? You were going straight, you were going fast, you had a nice stand-up landing, and it just didn't seem like you had any problems. Well, like I said, I'm going to give you the story from the little man behind the curtain. This is the inner sanctum type story. No, it was not that easy, and Kim Vesley, who is here tonight, who is our very professional PR department, may have glossed over 1 or 2 minor details of the flight while we were in the air, but when our lawyers found out about it, they panicked. They said, oh no, somebody else is going to think it's that easy, and they're going to want to do it, and then they're going to fail, and they're going to sue you. So we have come up with a disclaimer. Here's the disclaimer. Do not attempt this if you are allergic to long periods in confined spaces, long exposure to cold and wet conditions, high altitude, low oxygen environments, the sight of large expanses of water directly beneath you. Consult your professional Atlantic balloonist, i.e. Bert Bedell, to be cured of any desire to reenact this flight. The proprietors of this establishment take no responsibility for any of your stupid decisions. And no, the balloon is not available for rent if we ever do get it back from Luxembourg. Okay. What I would like to do now is let you in on 3 minutes of a video, if I can do this, of a Zoom meeting that we had on June 1st. And why is that not minimizing for me? Okay. Now I need to get out of this. And what it basically is Don Day giving us a green light to actually do the flight. We had been having weekly Zoom meetings in 2026, not 1926. And the story had always been the same. It had been, the weather's not right for going next week, but trust me, it will get better. We have seen greener pastures on the horizon. So this week, we got a little bit of a different story. If I can get this to play. I think it's going to start. Okay, this is all the critical players. You can see Don is getting ready to brief there. It's not showing up on the screen. Okay. Do I need...
Isn't that, and you press play.
We tried this before and it was
We did
working.
try it. Oh, duplicate, let's try that one.
Okay. There we go. Thank you, Nan, my savior.
Okay, well, we'll see.
You get a second sandbag.
Let's see if the sound is going to, because it's, oh. Okay, let's see. Let's try one more thing.
We'll get there, guys. It's worth it, believe me. This runs 3 minutes out of an hour. We are playing. Let me see if I can stop that right now. Okay, we're stopped. Okay.
24 to 30 hours of the flight. We have this wave coming out.
Let me see if I can back it up to the beginning here.
It's gonna come through.
Oh, I can.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so here we go in summary. Pattern is holding. Things are looking very stable and better agreement in the modeling, so that gives us better confidence. Randy and I talked this morning, and we suggest that we go green. There's some things we got to talk about, but going green meaning the launch opportunity local time Thursday night into Friday morning, or sometime around 9 UTC to 12 UTC. We're not looking at optimal launch conditions. We'll go into more detail here in a minute on things, but I'm hitting the highlights. We still could see some variance when the best launch window is, so we can try to catch the best winds and also stay out ahead of the weather. And speaking of weather, the first 24 to 30 hours of the flight, we have this wave coming out of Canada that is gonna come through and pass by. And the temperatures aloft with this is something I looked at yesterday. It was a little shocking how cold the air is aloft. And so we need to have a little bit of a discussion of freezing temperatures at flight level and maybe some clouds and precipitation, potential icing. It's just something we need to talk about. That being said, we'll just kind of step through the modeling here like before. You can see the low off the East Coast. Both the European and the GFS now are much better in sync, okay? So that's great to see. And what I want you to notice through this whole process is you see the high that's west of the Azores, and you see the deep low southeast of Greenland. The pressure gradient between those two systems is what's driving that quick zonal flow across the North Atlantic. And rotating around the base of that trough are these little waves. And so the next wave you can see is just southwest of Hudson Bay, north of Lake Superior there. That's what's going to come through Friday night and Saturday. So if we were to step through the 24-hour periods like we've been doing, so this is approximately near launch. This is 24 hours launch plus 24. You can see that little indentation in the flow right here, and see how it's about over lining up with Newfoundland. So there's going to be a little bit of weather right here. Late Friday night and Saturday morning. 24 hours later, the wave minors out, gets stretched out in the flow there. So this is Sunday morning.
Okay, I cut it off right there. I apologize for my not very expert editing, but by Sunday morning we were actually down on the ground. And it is amazing how Don nailed about 4 items that actually came to fruition, one of which was the little bit of rain and weather that we were going to have in the first 24 hours, the fast winds, and the not so great inflation conditions. So it pretty much all came to fruition the way he said it would, only more so. We got a little bit more than just a little weather, and I'm going to now go into the main slideshow, and I think I can do this on my own now. Is that showing up? There we go. All right. It only took 4 tries. All right, so that was on June 1st, Monday. Barbara and I were sitting in Albuquerque listening to that. We had reservations to fly from Albuquerque to Bangor, Maine, which we activated, and we brought along Kim Vesley and Rob Keyes, who I don't know if he's Here, I'll hold it. Okay. So, it's not the easiest thing to do to get from Albuquerque to Bangor, Maine. It was 3 stops, I think Dallas and New York and then Bangor. And then when we got to Bangor, we still had about a 4-hour drive to Presque Isle because Presque Isle is way up to the northeast corner of Maine. And why did we choose Presque Isle as a place to launch? Well, partially it was because it was as far east as we could get and still stay in the United States, but also partially it was because Bert is very, very dedicated to the history of gas ballooning, and that is where Double Eagle 2 took off from. We actually launched about 5 miles from the field that they launched from, which now has a monument in it, but I will tell you there's no plans to put a monument at our launch site. Okay. It's on private ground. So, June 2nd, we are now in Bangor, Maine. We are driving from Bangor, Maine up to Presque Isle, Maine. We get a phone call from Bert who says, Don Day has been talking to Tomas Hora, and it looks like we're going to launch a day earlier than we had originally planned. So no Thursday night launch, now a Wednesday night launch. It is now Tuesday. We're going to get up to Presque Isle Tuesday late, and we are going to get a couple hours of sleep, turn around and start inflating the balloon. The pattern, by the way, that Don had been talking about, a little bit more explanation. The 2 red X's are our approximate launch spot and our eventual landing spot. And the blue semicircle is supposed to represent a high that is circulating clockwise beneath us. And the low is the red that is a counterclockwise circulation to the north of us. And as every pilot who's been to ground school knows, when you get between a low and a high and they're both going in the same direction, it's kind of like you're a piece of cheese between a roller getting pushed. That dark red is wind speed, and the plan was for us just to go right between the 2 of those, stay far enough away from the low to the north of us, because again, as every student pilot knows, lows are bad news and highs are good news, and just end up in Luxembourg. We planned it all along for Luxembourg. Sure we did. Okay. This is something else that Don had been showing us for weeks and weeks. This is what he calls the stoplight chart. This is something that you haven't seen on social media, so I'm trying to honor my request to show you stuff that is not on social media. You'll notice a lot of red boxes. The horizontal rows are different parameters that we needed to be green for us to have confidence that the flight was going to go across. You'll notice that the vertical columns are days. So June 1st was Monday. This chart showed that the 4th and the 5th, Thursday and Friday, were either green or yellow on all of the critical components, and then they went back to red again on a lot of them on the 6th. So this was going to be now or never. And as a matter of fact, Randy Lefevre, who was the other meteorologist on this project for us, during that Monday briefing in a part that I didn't video, said, hey guys, this is as good as you're going to get. You better take this one, or else you're going to be waiting several months for the next one, most likely. Okay, now I'm going to force you guys to look at a few word charts, and I know Barbara has told me there's way too many words on these charts, but if you bear with me through the word charts, the pretty pictures will be coming here in a few minutes, and all you have to do is bear with me. This is our 90,000 cubic foot balloon. I want you to note that we took off with about 3,600 pounds of sand ballast. That number is red because I want you to remember that number for a future slide. The basket itself, 155 pounds. The envelope, 490 pounds. Gross lift, if we had been at sea level and 100% full, would have been about 6,000 pounds. We didn't fill the balloon completely, so we actually launched with about 5,650 pounds. The same size hot air balloon would have had roughly 1,800 pounds of lift. So you can see that we really didn't need a bigger balloon than this. This was enough to keep us in the air for 5 or 6 days, we estimated. Okay, this is the team, and every one of them are amazing people. I'm going to just go down the list really quickly. Kevin Stoss has been running command centers for everyone from the around the world people to other attempts. Don Day, I've said before, he's the best weatherman there ever is. Our inflation crew, Jason Fisher, has been with us all 4 years. Chase crew, Barbara Fricke, Joni Padel, and John Piper. I'm going to have something more to say about them a few slides down the road. Kim Vestley, I think you all know her and you know what kind of a job she did. Paul Sear, the landowner, amazing person. He owns 200 acres up in Maine. His claim to fame is that as a younger person, he was a snowmobile racer, champion snowmobile racer. He has, off in a corner of his workshop, which he let us use, probably 30 different trophies from snowmobiling. And not only that, he's also an inventor because he invented a gizmo that you put on the bottom of your ski-mobile, and it makes it go about 10 miles faster. And he ended up selling that to one of the big companies and was able to retire based on that. Hydrogen. You don't know how hard it is to get 100,000 cubic feet of hydrogen in this day and age. I, for the past 3 years, have been trying to get about 37,000 cubic feet of hydrogen to do a gas flight around here. And I've talked to Matheson Tri-Gas, I've talked to Air Liquide, and not only do they say no, they say other words, because I am not a regular customer. And even if I was willing to pay the prices that they're asking, they only have hydrogen for their regular customers. Unless I'm willing to buy probably a couple 100,000 cubic feet every month or every week, they're not interested in talking to me. So the fact that Bert, again, the godfather of this whole project, was able to come up with a very small company that initially was called General Hydrogen, but during the 4-year period that we were working on it, it morphed into Gaseous Hydrogen and Cryo Services. But all 4 years, Sunny Punj, who is from India, was there, very supportive, and provided us with the hydrogen. I'm going to talk more about that also down the road just a little bit. Okay, what do we have in the way of electronics on board? People have been asking. Just about everything you could possibly have except a toaster. And how is it all powered? We had a very high technology, non-rechargeable battery that was manufactured by a company called Saft. They became ballast when we used them, and we did ballast a lot of batteries because we took much more than we needed. But if you can think of anything on that list that's not on that list that we should have taken, I'd be interested in knowing about it because we were electrified up the yin-yang. All right, here's what actually happened. And I'm going to compare this to the other 2 transatlantic flights that have happened in the past from the United States in just a minute. But one of the interesting numbers I think there is that bottom number. How many pounds of ballast did I say we took off with? Right around 3,600 pounds. How many pounds of ballast did we land with? That's 3 bags. I think we pushed this about as far as we could have pushed it. And there's going to be more on that in a bit. But the other interesting number that I don't think has hit the airwaves yet is we covered 74 degrees of longitude. Does anybody know how many degrees of longitude it takes to go completely around the Earth? How about 360? Okay. So we went about 1/5 of the way around the Earth, which was pretty cool, I thought. Maximum speed, 93 miles an hour. Minimum outside temperature, minus 19 degrees. I don't think we ever experienced that inside the basket because we did have a rain shield. 25,000 feet. I'm going to talk some more about that in a bit. We had intended to do this flight at 18,000 feet or less, and our oxygen system was rated for 18,000 feet, which is going to be an interesting story down the road here in just a bit. Okay, these are the 3 previous flights, or the 2 previous flights and our flight that have taken off from mainland US and landed in mainland Europe. Double Eagle 2, everybody knows about that flight. That happened in August of 1978. Joe Kittinger, September of 1984, and then us. Now, Double Eagle was an amazing flight, but I actually think the Rosie O'Grady flight was somewhat more amazing because Joe Kittinger did it solo. And he was in the air for 83 hours and 40 minutes. He landed in Italy, broke his ankle, and didn't seem to bother him a bit because he was on dry ground when he landed. And that's always a good thing. I can tell you that being back on the ground was good. We were the only one who did it with hydrogen. We did it second longest. Joe's was further because he made it to Italy. We were the highest at 25,000 feet. And 2 of the 3 took off from Presque Isle, Maine. Joe took off from Caribou, but all 3 took off from Maine. So that's pretty good kudos for Maine. Now, this is not saying that other balloons have not crossed the Atlantic. There was actually a 1,000,000 cubic foot hot air balloon that went across very quickly. It was Lindstrom and Branson and Lindstrom who went across. And they were up at, I think, 35,000 feet. And they just zipped across. There have also been Rosier balloons that have gone across. Several of them have taken off from Canada, from Nova Scotia. But these are the only 3 straight gas balloons that have taken off from mainland US and made it to mainland Europe. And we think we were applying for a record for the AA9 category for distance. The current record is being held by David Hempelman Adams. He actually flew an AA6 across, but because no AA7, AA8, or AA9 balloon has gone further, he holds 4 records, and we're going to chop one off his list. But the good news is his daughter is going to be back on the list, so he's kind of passing it off to the next generation. That paperwork has not been validated yet, but we haven't heard that there's going to be any problem with it. Any questions on that? Okay. Now, you get the pictures. How do you test inflate a newly repaired 90,000 cubic foot gas balloon in January in Pennsylvania? We looked for a long time, and we talked to a lot of people, and we got a very nice minor league hockey team owner who was very happy to have us take this whole big balloon, which is just the 90,000 cubic foot balloon, but it needs about a 60-foot ceiling to do this, filled it up with air, and hung weighted lines off various points in the envelope and had them hanging about a couple inches above the ground, and then let it sit there for a couple of hours and watched whether the weights started sagging. Now, admittedly, air is not exactly the same as hydrogen, but this was a pretty good indication that this balloon was airtight. And you'll also notice up at the very top there, that is the valve that lets the hydrogen out of the balloon. It doesn't look very big, and it isn't very big, but in addition, to that valve, there are 2 deflation ports, which are 4-foot diameter openings, closures that can actually be opened to let much greater, faster amount of hydrogen out when it comes time to land the balloon. So there's 2 ways to let hydrogen out of this balloon. You can do it in a controlled fashion with that valve, or you can do it in a much faster fashion with the deflation ports. Okay, this is Paul Sears' 200 acres. And that field that is planted there, has grown up, I believe, is going to be planted in potatoes, because Maine claims to have the best potatoes in the United States. They claim that all the potatoes that are grown in Idaho came from stock that came from Maine, and you better not talk about Idaho potatoes in Maine. Idaho potatoes are going to feature down the road here in this story just a little bit more. I want you to look at that white-yellow Tiger truck that's sitting right there. That is the hydrogen. That's a 10-tube hydrogen tanker truck. And that actually, in a very large way, determined the time duration of this flight, because that was leased from May 1st to July 31st. And it was just left there full of hydrogen. Let me tell you, getting the hydrogen is one thing. Getting a company to let you have their trailer for 3 months is a whole other thing, because those trailers are in big demand, and not being able to use them to deliver product for 3 months is a big downside. So we did compensate the hydrogen company very well for that. The other thing is you got to get yourself a driver who has a CDL with a hazardous materials endorsement. And those guys are kind of in short supply right now also. So off on the side, this is a Quonset hut where we staged a lot of our equipment. There was also a workshop, which was down here, which Paul gave us access to, where we did a whole lot of our assembly. After we assembled it, we moved it from the workshop up to the Quonset hut. And then when time came, we brought it out onto the field to the actual launch site. Launch site was about right here. In 2025, when we launched, we went in this direction towards the open end of the field. In 2026, we went in this direction, right, towards this tree line here, which proved to be a bit interesting down the road a little bit. Okay, on to the next slide. that is Paul Sear and that is Bert Patel, and they're standing right in front of the basket, and you can kind of see how big the basket isn't. This is Wednesday. This was actually the morning of the day we launched. We actually had another conference call with Don Day. That is now in Paul Sear's workshop. That is Paul right there. You can see me and Barbara and Bert and Alicia and Rob Keys from Albuquerque. Are we hearing okay here? And this was probably about 10 o'clock in the morning. We got the final go. Things were still looking good. We were now going to be launching Wednesday evening instead of Thursday evening. So everybody has got their game face on here. And by the way, all of these photographs are photographs that Paul Sear took. So in addition to being a snowmobiler, he is a very, very accomplished photographer. And if you go to his website, Paul Sear Photography, you'll see some great photographs of a lot of different things, including some of the photographs of this flight as we took off. So amazing guy, very, very humble, very accommodating, put up with us for 3 or 4 straight years and wants us to come back next year. I don't think it's going to happen. That is one of Paul's little toys. He has lots of little toys, and he used all of them to help us. That is the envelope of the gas balloon heading from the workshop up to the Quonset hut and out onto the field. And I think Paul is driving it, although you can't see that. And this is just one. He had skid steers. He had 3 or 4 stationed around the launch site for us to tie down to. As you can see, that was a good thing that we had those all. And so this is game on right now. Balloon is moving to the launch site. Jumping forward, we have now got the balloon half inflated. And it's a little breezy. And let me give you a backstory on that one that you may not have heard. The idea was for the pilots to be back in their nice warm beds, sleeping until 6 o'clock in the evening, and then to come out at 6 o'clock in the evening and have the balloon standing up, and they would just jump into it, and we were supposed to be in the air by 10 p.m. Wednesday evening. I had rented a house for Barbara and the rest of our crew. Unfortunately, that house did not have very good Wi-Fi, and it had no cell phone coverage, so we didn't really know what the status was. So I did what I was told to do. I came back at 6 o'clock, and the balloon was still laying on the ground without any hydrogen in it. This was a little disappointing, but it was totally understandable because it was blowing up a gale, and Joni Padel, who is Bert's wife and who was responsible for deciding when to actually start pumping hydrogen in the balloon, did not feel comfortable. So we stood around and we talked, and we finally decided again that it was now enough. Things seemed to have calmed down just a little bit. And we got enough gas in the balloon that it was holding itself up. You can see this balloon has a pretty good bubble up in the top, and even though it's leaning over, it's not in any danger of going into the trees or going completely over. The biggest risk here probably is the basket that has all the load on it. And if a basket would get picked up off the ground and smashed back into the ground, it would possibly damage the basket. So that was one thing we were worried about. We did eventually get the balloon completely full. That's a Paul Sear photograph. And when I say completely full, I mean as full as we wanted it to be. You'll notice that the bottom of it is flaccid. That was intentional, because another little detail of gas balloons is as they go up, the pressure in the atmosphere decreases. The gas inside the balloon says, oh, less pressure, I can expand, and I'm going to fill up this whole balloon. And we had this set to level off at about 3,000 to 5,000 feet above the ground, and that is why the balloon was not full. You'll see it in a later picture in the air where it actually is full. Now, we sat on the ground for a long time with a lot of extra weight on the balloon because we didn't want the balloon to fly away without us in it. That would not have been good. And the way-off process requires us to take all that extra weight off, get the balloon just buoyant, and then drop what's called a dead man, which is another 150 pounds or so that gives us our positive lift to take out of the buoyancy. In order to do that, you have to have relatively calm conditions, again, because you're taking off all of your safety ballast, and the balloon is now wanting to fly away. We did not get a window to do our way off at 9 o'clock, at 10 o'clock, at 11 o'clock, at 12 o'clock. At about 1 o'clock, we had a 15-minute period of calm. I still don't understand the meteorology behind that. We got the balloon weight off, and then the wind picked back up again. So now we're hanging on for dear life because we don't have the safety ballast on. About 45 minutes later, we got another 15-minute window. And again, we said, it's now or never. This is a phrase that came up in this flight a couple of times. So no, it really wasn't all that easy. There were a couple of now or never moments. We actually launched. We got over the tree line. We radioed back to the people on the ground, and they said, "Thank heavens you're out of here. It's blowing like crazy again." So explain that weather to me. There were some really multiple events that I still cannot explain to this day. But anyway, we were in the air, and that was a really exhilarating feeling. For the next 4 hours at night, we flew. The balloon was doing exactly what it was supposed to be doing. It went up to 3,000 feet. It leveled off. It gave us a lot of confidence that the fact that whatever happened last year was not happening this year, and that we had a good balloon. And we were still over land. One of the reasons we launched, which I didn't mention before, from Presque Isle is because there's a goodly amount of land to the east of you, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, where we landed the year before, and you have a chance to do a shakeout and get your confidence up in your balloon. And we did that. And of course, we had to have a chili ristra, because as I said, Bert Padelt is a historian, and he knew that there was a chili ristra in the Double Eagle too. And that chili ristra made it all the way back to Albuquerque. And thanks, by the way, to Kim Vesley for providing that chili ristra, which it had somehow slipped our mind. You'll also notice that up at the very top of the balloon there's what looks like a whole bunch of plastic that's curled up with Velcro holding it. You take that Velcro off, and that plastic comes down around the basket, and it's what's called the rain skirt, rain shield, and that is, again, going to become important a little bit down the road here. But right now, we're looking at the lights of, this is probably Nova Scotia. Sun hasn't come up yet, but this is what it looked like when the sun did come up. You're going to notice that most of the pretty pictures are either at the very beginning of the flight or at the very end of the flight. You can figure out why that is. Front and center in that photograph is a lawn chair. Why is there a lawn chair there? It's because Double Eagle 2 had 2 lawn chairs. And again, Bert really believed in tradition, and those did eventually become ballast, but they were pretty comfortable to sit in. Sorry, Nan, they're not available for the museum display. You'll also notice that there are different color sandbags there. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but let's go on to the next picture. It really was beautiful. Thursday morning, when we actually got over land, we had some really nice views, and we thought, yeah, no sweat, this is going to be an easy flight, just like everybody thought it was. That is a photograph that was taken by an innocent bystander on the ground over Cape Breton Island. We have permission to use it. That is what a gas balloon should look like. It's nice and full. This little lip around the bottom here is supposed to cause all the rain, when you get in the rain, which of course you're not going to get in rain, to come down and fall off of that and go outside the edge of the basket and not get into the basket. Okay? That's the theory. This thing over here is the Starlink antenna. And it looks like it's hanging out in the middle of nowhere, but we did have a tether line that we could bring it in if we needed to do anything with it. We carried, as that previously said, 2 Starlinks. This is the night lights that were hanging underneath the balloon. And I believe in a larger view of this picture, you can actually see us that we're sand ballasting at this point to go up. Again, you can see different colored sandbags around the edge there. Neat photograph, pretty much the only photograph we have of the balloon in the air. Okay, Prince Edward Island lives long and dear in our memory because that is where we landed last year. This year we flew right over it, and as sunset was coming up on Thursday, that was, I believe that's a sunset view. Don't hold me to that if I am sure, but I'm pretty sure it is. Now, you want to know what the inside of the basket looked like? It was rather busy. This little guy right here is Piper. He's one of 3 Pipers involved in this project. This is Piper the doll. He belongs to Bert, and he was to keep Bert from having separation anxiety because the second Piper was Piper the dog, which was a present to Bert a couple of Christmases ago from one of his sons, and he very quickly became probably the most important member of the Padelt family, and Bert had to have a stand-in for Piper on the flight. The other Piper, by the way, is John Piper, who you'll see in a photograph, who was our official observer for the FAI records event. And his day job, until he retired a couple years ago, was he ran, as Barbara likes to call it, the Macy's Day Parade. He was the man in charge of the Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York City. So he comes with really good credentials. What we're looking at here, this is a little desk. This is Alicia's feet. She wore the bottom half of her survival suit the whole way across, I think just to stay warm. And it was probably not a bad idea because those survival suits are a pain to get into. And if we'd had to ditch quickly, having it half on would have been better than not having it on at all. This is our display, which was pretty much real time because of the Starlink that we had. I will say that the electronics we had on this flight really made the flight much easier, and it really made me appreciate much more what the Double Eagle 2 crew went through 48 years ago. Coming up on the 50-year anniversary, by the way, for them. Hard to believe. But we had so much more electronics. This is an oxygen distribution box that's called on-demand oxygen. That's going to also show up down the road here a little bit. It was, the idea with that is it provides a puff of oxygen every time you breathe in, and it allows your oxygen tank to last about 4 times longer than it would with a continuous flow system. Whole bunch of other stuff here. That's a GPS. But now let's talk about the sandbags. There are actually 4 different color sandbags on the system. There are the red ones. There are 30 red ones. There are the yellow ones. There are 30 yellow ones. There are the blue ones. There are 30 blue ones. And there were supposed to be 30 green ones. We actually took off with 19 green ones. Why are they different colors? It's because we're going to use the green ones first. Then we're going to use the blue ones. Then we're going to use the yellow ones. Then we're going to start praying. Because at that point, we only got 30 bags left. So it was a really good system, and they were loaded so that the ones that would come off first would be the right color. It was just an easy way to keep track, because anybody who's been on a gas flight, and Ray Bear has been on a gas flight, so I'm going to use him as a guinea pig, knows that half the time you're in the basket, you're counting how many sandbags you have left, because that's your fuel, and when you run out of sandbags, you better be back down on the ground. Okay, late Friday, things started looking not quite so good as they had been before. We started getting some cumulus clouds, pretty thick layer. We remembered what Don Day had said about the first 24 to 36 hours. We might run into a bit of weather. Well, Don was right, but not quite as right as he might have been on that one. A little bit later in the day, we put the rain skirt down, and that is ice on the rain skirt. We had a thermometer that had indoor-outdoor temperature. That particular shot showed -9 degrees, but it was still fairly warm inside, 28 degrees. It got colder than that. It got down to -19 degrees, and I think we were in the single digits inside the basket. We knew that with as much ice as was building up on the rain skirt, that there was also a lot of ice building up on the balloon itself. One reason we knew that is because it took us about 10 bags of ballast to stay flying level. That's about 300 pounds of sand. So that probably means that there was about 300 pounds of ice building up on the balloon. We were also going through sunset, and the rain started as rain, changed to snow, and then changed to ice. We went down. The idea initially, with the conversation with Don, was to try and slow up and let the front pass us faster, as Don had said it would do. We tried that. It started sending us in a not so great direction, so we decided to come back up again, and didn't take that much ballast to come back up again, because that's the way gas balloons work. Eventually, the front did pass us, and by the way, this was the period when we were going the fastest during the whole flight as the front was pushing us along. We hit 93 miles an hour at this point while we were in the rain, and we didn't feel it because you're going with the wind, but it's still kind of impressive to know that you're going 93 miles an hour. Eventually, the front did pass us by, this would have been Saturday morning, and we started shedding the ice. What happens when you shed the ice? You get light. You start going back up again. We had not intended, as I said, to go above 18,000 feet on this balloon, but 300 pounds of ice coming off the balloon will send you up pretty fast. And we were in contact with oceanic control. The way this works in terms of communication with air traffic control is until you get off land, you're communicating with the normal ATC in the US and Canada. And by the way, one of the other details that Bert had to worry about was getting us permission to fly higher than 5,000 feet over Canada. And that required a whole bunch of paperwork, and it all got done. That's a side story. After you get out over the ocean, when you're west of 30 degrees west longitude, you talk to Gander via HF radio. And when you're east of 30 degrees west, you talk to Shanwick via the same way. We actually had an HF radio on board, but our command center was very, very competent, and they had specific identification where we were. They relayed our information to Oceanic, and what Oceanic did was they kept a 150-mile radius keep-out zone around us. So if you happen to be watching Flight Radar 24, you might have seen aircrafts diverting slightly around us, not hugely, but that was really reassuring to know that there weren't going to be any aircraft around us. Anyway, we get up to 20,000 feet. We asked for permission to go to 21,000 feet. We get it. Same thing for 22,000, 23,000. The balloon is still going up, 24,000. At 25,000 feet, Oceanic said, nope, can't go any higher. We had been very reluctant to valve off some gas to stop the ascent because we weren't sure, even though there's a protective tent around the valve, whether or not some ice chunks might have been in the vicinity of the valve. And opening up the valve and having an ice chunk slide in and the valve not closing again would have been catastrophic. So we let the balloon go up to 25,000. By that time, it was warm enough. We felt we had to valve, and we had the cover over it, and there was a lot of ice coming off the balloon. And it was fine. We valved, and we kept it almost below 25,000 feet. We got one call from Oceanic saying, you guys are at 20,000, 25,000, 50 feet. Yeah, we know. We're coming back down again. And that we're okay with that. We didn't really violate their airspace too badly, and they never dinged us for it. Okay. This is my attempt at putting all the information I possibly could about the flight onto one sheet. So there's way too much information on it. But our manual log that we were keeping in the balloon, which only went about a third of the way across because it got waterlogged after the rain started coming in, mentions that very light snow was happening right about there. So from there through Friday night was the period I've just been describing, and that was when our maximum speed was, which is right there on the speed. The blue is speed, the red is altitude. Our maximum altitude actually came much later when all of the ice melted off and we started popping up to 25,000 feet. That was kind of just south of Ireland. You'll notice that the gray periods are nighttime and the lighter periods are daytime, and they're not equally spaced. There's the same number of hours in this day as in this day as in this day, but the reason this day covers a lot more distance is because we were going a lot faster. So it's kind of interesting. This is 60 degrees west longitude. This is 30 degrees west longitude. This is prime meridian. We end up landing at 6 degrees east after taking off at 68 degrees west. So that's why I said we covered a total of 72 degrees of longitude. What else can I tell you about this? We really did go pretty much straight across, and that little tiny country right there is Luxembourg, where we ended up landing. I don't know how we managed to hit it, but we were really happy to be down. I will tell you that.
How come you have a place named after you?
How come I have a place? Where? Oh! That's...
Where is Cuneo in Luxembourg?
So the flight that they were going to take out on Saturday was not going to work. They started looking at possible flights on Friday, and they saw one at 7 o'clock in the evening, if I'm telling the story right. Barbara, if I'm not, correct me. But they weren't going to make it down to Newark by that time, so they found one at 9 o'clock. Again, that was not going to work. Uh-oh, we got another...
I'm trying to get the hot spot so we can get the answer.
Finally, they found a flight that was flying out of Newark at 11:58 midnight. And it actually left a few minutes later than that. They got on it. They got to Paris at about 1 o'clock Saturday afternoon, still not having had much sleep. Got a rental van for 15 people, which was pretty much a miracle because they didn't have a reservation, and it took them about 4 tries to do that. Started driving out of Paris, headed towards the coast because they thought there's a possibility we might land as soon as we hit the coast. Got redirected fairly quickly and told to start heading east. They hooked up with Anja Koemerlein, who is from Belgium and knew the local roads, and basically caravanned all the way to the landing site, and they were there. Is that more thunder?
There's a really bad electrical storm outside.
We picked a good day. And they were there at the landing site within 15 minutes of us landing. So now, minor miracle, or maybe a major miracle. Now, let's go back to the flight, because this was just a little diversion here. We still haven't gone across. The ice storm has abated. We are now flying in clear skies. Like I said, not many pictures across the water. This is about the first picture of land that we saw. This is the island of Jersey. It was fairly early Saturday morning. We still were not over solid land, but this was kind of a reassuring sight because we knew we were getting close. I think this is actually a British property, even though it's off the coast of France. There's also, besides, this is one of the Channel Islands, I'm pretty sure. Okay, this was a nice little thing that we had to worry about. This is military area that was actually not active when we flew over it. It was supposed to go active on Monday. Our initial flight plan showed us getting this point sometime on Monday. Hey! Should we try the microphone again? Yeah. You can hear the microphone? Are you hearing me now? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I can't tell if it's on or not. We were really happy, one, that it wasn't Monday, and two, that we missed this. There was another area that we kind of had to avoid, which was the French nuclear submarine base. Which was, we could fly over it as long as we were above 21,000 feet, but we ended up missing it, and we were above 21,000 feet, so somebody was watching out for us on this flight. This one, our command center didn't tell us about. I didn't find out about this until after the flight, because it was not going to be hot, and they knew it was going to be hot. But the year before, we had been looking at this same area, and there was a possibility that during the week it would be hot. We okay on the? All right, there is the coastline. You may not be able to see it, but right there, the waves breaking. This is land. That's water. Those are clouds. That's our basket. Believe me, this was a very welcome sight. And I have a story to tell about this that also is not on social media. I was manning the radio at this point because Bert claimed I had more experience talking to European air traffic controllers than he did. And they contacted me and said, are you planning on landing as soon as you get over land? Because they kind of knew our story and they knew our prime goal was just to land. And we had talked to our meteorologists and they said, yeah, it's going to be just about sunset. It's going to be 30-mile-an-hour winds. And we recommend that you keep flying. We had about 7 bags of ballast left at this point. Plus, as you'll find out, we had other miscellaneous stuff that we could ballast. And I got back on the radio and I said, no, we're going to continue flying. But I wasn't really in my very good pilot voice. I was actually a bit choked up about seeing land. I still am. And the air traffic controller said, okay, no problem. But he called me back about 30 seconds later and he said, are you guys okay up there? You sounded a little strange on the radio. And I took a deep breath and I said, yeah, we're okay. And he said, good, I'm glad to hear it. But that was the first land. This is Le Havre. And if you know France, which I didn't know until I got there, there's a little spit of land that sticks out to the north, and that's what we initially did our landfall on. But after you go over that, you go into a harbor that has Le Havre at the east end of it. This was actually Normandy. This was D-Day. We happened to go over this particular piece of land on the 82nd anniversary of June 6th. That was D-Day. And it was also a really good thing that we did that because when we were over the harbor, we dumped 2 very heavy empty oxygen cylinders. We dumped a porta potty. And we dumped some batteries. And that is really what allowed us to get through the next night. Now, the nice thing about a night in June as opposed to a night in October or November, which is when we normally fly our gas balloons for the America's Challenges. Night is only about 8 hours long in June, whereas it's about 14 hours long in October. So we really didn't have that long to go. And with our 7 bags of sand, the balloon is filing really well. Another thing about a balloon, a gas balloon, is that you use a lot of ballast the first night, you use less ballast the second night, and you use even less ballast the third night. We were in our actual third night, actually our fourth night because we started out in the first night. So we had high confidence that we would not have to do a nighttime landing. Nighttime landings, just like in hot air balloons and gas balloons, are not pleasant. I've done one in my life, and I don't ever want to do it again, and Barbara can back me up on that because she was also present at that landing. Anyway, that's a nice photograph of the sun setting over Le Havre. Through the night, we had actually some clear skies. That is a very small town with streetlights. And to me, it looks like an anteater, but I had to take a picture of it because it's a really bad fuzzy picture, but it's my anteater. Just had to show you guys that. That was another really low quality photograph because it's kind of out of focus and it's a long exposure, but it kind of reminds me of moon over Ansel Adams, moon over, can't remember, an Ansel Adams photograph. It's also that sepia color because there really wasn't much light to take the photograph. Okay, we are now ready to land. I love this photograph. That is Bert Bedelt with his hand on the valve line, concentrating 110% on getting down below the clouds. The technique for landing the gas balloon is to keep it coming down at a constant rate by valving and counteract the sun that's coming up that is heating the gas inside the balloon that wants to make the balloon go up. So the idea was, in Bert's mind, to keep the balloon coming down at 200 feet a minute. That minimizes the amount of turbulence that goes on in the gas inside the balloon. It gives you a chance to evaluate what you see when you finally get below the cloud level. And we had been told by our meteorologists that it was about a 5,000 foot ceiling, so we knew we'd have plenty of space underneath it. But we still wanted to get down as early as we can in the day because that was the calmest wind forecast. So as we're coming down, we're just doing it slowly, gently. Right here is his altimeter. He's watching that also. And I was standing behind him. He was doing the landing. I took this picture just because, to me, this is the quintessential Bert. 100% concentration on whatever he's doing, and he did a great job. Another side story on this one, as we're coming down, I start seeing long, probably 2 or 3 feet long, slivers falling off the balloon. They were ice that had accumulated on the load tapes, and they were the last thing to break free, and they were kind of helicoptering down, spinning, breaking up into little pieces, and it really wasn't a significant amount of weight. If we had lost a lot of weight, we would have had to have counteracted by valving more because we wanted to go down, not up, and taking weight off the gas balloon is going to make you go up, not go down. But it was still pretty amazing to watch these things just go spiraling down. And there must have been 20 or 30 of them that came down. I'm not sure Bert even noticed them because he was concentrating so much. It's something I've never seen on a gas balloon before. Probably will never see again. Okay, come down through the clouds. The first thing I see is wide open green fields with strips of trees between them. If you've ever been in Europe, the farmers tend to leave strips of trees for windbreaks. And the other thing I saw that I really like, and everybody who's been to ground school will know why I like this, was fog in the valleys, the rolling valleys. What does fog mean in a valley? Calm winds, no winds. So we had a bunch of weather reports that said it was going to be calm winds, but this was just verification that we did. We got down, we're coming down a tree line. Bert ballasts just a little bit to go over the tree line, starts descending again. The valley is going down. We're going down with the valley. We're kind of sloping down as the slope of the ground goes down. Eventually, we accelerate a little bit more down and do a stand-up landing. And Bert says, "Oh, there's a road down there. I'm going to fly the balloon down to the road." And I said, "No, you are not." We are on the ground. There were 2 fences between us and the road. And the reason there were 2 fences was there were some cows in the field, and they came to visit us. I said, "I will get out of the basket. I will walk the balloon over the fence. I will lift the balloon over the fence. I will shimmy under the fence. I will do that for the second fence." And it was calm enough that that really was a feasible thing to do. And we did that. About that time, there were people coming up the valley to meet us. And so we landed about here. The two fences were about here. Here's where we ended up, by the road. And we could see people walking up the valley here. Turns out that we landed about half an hour from the clubhouse of the largest gas balloon club in Luxembourg. I do not know how this all worked out, but it did. Claude Weber was there within 15 minutes of our landing. Claude Weber is the newly elected president of the CIA. And no, the CIA is not what you think it is. It's the Commission Internationale Aeronautique. It is the ballooning leg of the FAI. And he was amazing. His father was Jean-Claude Weber, who was the president of the CIA before he was. He arranged for a flatbed to come put the balloon envelope and the basket on it and take it back to his clubhouse, and that's where the balloon is sitting right now. So if anybody knows any 777 pilots who want to fly some extra cargo back from Luxembourg to the US, we'd be interested in talking to them. Anyway, everyone who showed up at the launch site was balloonists. We had been hearing horror stories about Double Eagle 2, about David Hempel-Manav's flight across, where a whole bunch of souvenir seekers had come and just ripped the balloon to shred. We did not have one person who was not a balloonist at the launch site. As a matter of fact, we had a hotel room arranged for us. Before we left there, we had an arrangement for a breakfast, which we were in serious need of. And they were just amazing. It was, I would honestly say, it was the best part of the flight. And there were a lot of good parts of the flight. So that is us looking a bit disheveled at the breakfast afterwards. You may recognize that's Tomáš Hora. This is Peter Kubitschek. He drove for 9 hours from the Czech Republic to be at the landing site. He and Bert are really good friends. Bert is a Kubitschek dealer. I am just wiped out. You can tell I have not put my makeup on yet. But so this was where we all got together and had breakfast the next day. From there on, there's a little story behind this picture also. You notice there's no pilots in this picture, but these guys sure look like they're enjoying themselves. I see a little ice cream there, a little coffee. So where were the pilots? Sleeping. We were at the police station. We were trying to explain to the local police why we had flown a balloon into Luxembourg without permission and why the balloon was not available for their inspection because it was now 45 minutes away in a warehouse, and why the third pilot had left for England and was no longer available, and why we picked Luxembourg to land. It took a while to get this across. And I will say that in my own defense, I was again doing the radio work when we were coming in for landing. I did contact air traffic control. I told them to cancel flight following, that we were doing an off-field landing, but this was not an emergency off-field landing. I made the mistake one time before in Minnesota of using the term off-field landing and had about every flashing light in the country show up at our landing site. I was very clear to emphasize to them that this was normal procedure for a gas balloon. What I didn't say, and I'm still not sure whether I was supposed to have said it or not, was feel free to have customs come to our landing site and inspect the aircraft. I talked to Claude Weber, and he claims that they should have done that without me asking them, but I don't know. So we had this nice interview with this young man with a bulletproof vest and an AK-47, and a woman with a bulletproof vest and an AK-47. And the initial discussion was about moving us to a immigrant detention center. But that backed off pretty quickly. And after about 2 hours, we came up with the logical explanation is we were trying to set a world record. That was the best explanation we could come up with for why we landed in Luxembourg. And no, Luxembourg wasn't really our original target, but it worked out really well. After that 2-hour interview, we were told we then had to go to talk to another group of people who were, I guess, representing, I don't know, customs or something. So we went into the next room, and lo and behold, the same woman who had been interviewing us with the AK-47 and the bulletproof vest was in that room. Her English was perfect, but for this particular interview, she could no longer talk directly to us. She had to talk to a third person in the room who was an interpreter, because procedure said for foreign people, you talk through an interpreter. So we talked through the interpreter, all the time listening to her English and our English, German, and it was kind of a joke. After we got finished with that, we had to drive 45 minutes out to the airport. And by the way, these three folks had already taken one trip to the airport while they were waiting for us to take Tomas Hora back to the airport, because Tomas had flown in from Norway, I think, for the day to go breakfast with us, and he was flying back again. This was the kind of support we got from everyone over there. So, taking their second trip to the airport, we got to the airport, we got fingerprinted, we showed them our passport, and now we were really in Luxembourg. What that meant was that when we went back to Paris, to fly out of Paris, they were going to actually let us get on the airplane. If we had not done that, we were not real people, we didn't exist, we weren't in Europe, and we couldn't get on the plane. So it all worked out in the end, and it was just one of those little hiccups along the road. This is the clubhouse for the Luxembourg Balloon Club. There's probably about 8 trailers in there with hot air balloons in it. This is about all we had left. These little things down at the bottom are the SAF batteries, a few sandbags. That's a survival suit. In the next picture, we're actually, I'm going to go over this. I don't need to show this again. This has pretty much been hit to death. This is the map of us just taking off. And you can see that we had some options. By the way, I didn't mention it, but there was a discussion about bailing out as we went past Newfoundland, because we had been using a significant amount of ballast. Not unusual for the first day in a flight balloon, but we could have dropped down low, curved more to the north, and probably hit the very southeast corner of Newfoundland. It would have been rocky, it would have been fast, and it would have been ugly, and we decided not to do that. So a little bit out of order, but that's kind of the geography where we took off from, how we went across New Brunswick. There's Prince Edward Island, which we were very happy to get past this year, because we hadn't made it past last year. Cape Breton Island is where that photograph was taken, and then out over the blue waters. Okay, I wanted to show this because it's a little bit more detailed description of our altitude, and it shows that generally the balloon did what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to continue climbing as we use more and more ballast until we decide it's time to come down and land. So 25,000 feet, just a little bit above, was our maximum altitude. There was a lot of zigzagging. That was our drop there was due to the icing, or maybe it was this drop, I'm not completely sure. This chute up here was when the ice started coming off. Interesting, but needs a lot more study. Okay, one more little detail. That is the Royal Palace of Luxembourg. That person sitting in the center here is the Grand Duke of Luxembourg. This gentleman right here is one of the major balloonists in Luxembourg. He has connections with the Grand Duke. We were eating dinner at the restaurant at the hotel where they very nicely set us up with, and a waiter came up to me and said, "Are you the Americans?" Is it that obvious? There's a phone call for you. It was this gentleman saying that he had an appointment for us the next morning to come have a visit with the Grand Duke. And we needed the names of all the people who were coming. We needed to get them to him really quickly. After about 3 more phone calls, we arranged that Bert and Joni and myself and Barbara and John Piper would be allowed to come visit the Grand Duke. And we got there at the appropriate time. We got issued into a little anteroom over on the first floor, over on the side. This gentleman started talking to us, and I said to myself, "Is this guy the Grand Duke? He doesn't seem like a Grand Duke." But he was just the guy who was keeping us busy while the Grand Duke was waiting. A few minutes later, this gentleman in a tuxedo wearing white gloves opens the door and says, "You may come and see the Grand Duke now." So we go up the staircase after they asked us if we needed the elevator, and we said, "No, we think we can handle the staircase." We went into a very nice room. We had a nice talk with the Grand Duke. He was very interested. He was very informed. After 20 minutes, which we were told was going to be the length of the interview, the little gentleman with the white gloves and the tuxedo came back and stuck his head in the door. The Grand Duke kind of waved him away, and we talked for another 20 minutes. And then we came down the steps and got the official photograph taken. So that was actually a nice little side story. And it's a pretty neat place. The whole population of Luxembourg is about 650,000. So this is actually roughly equivalent to going visiting the mayor of Albuquerque. Except not the same. we did a little touristing. That is a completely reconstructed medieval castle. And of course, every medieval castle has to have its suits of armor. So, and that's Barbara. That's not a suit of armor. Down there, that's Barbara. We did do a tour of that one, and it was pretty amazing. That's the river that runs right in front of it. That's us having a dinner on the next day, Wednesday, and that is the Luxembourg Balloon Club, all greeting us. We wanted to leave a souvenir for them. We didn't have very much left. We had one large, probably 3 or 4 foot high oxygen cylinder. We said, if you want it, you can have it. We autographed the oxygen cylinder. I don't know, they're sitting in their museum now, I guess. I don't know what they're going to do with it, but we got them something. Jean-Claude is this person right here. That is the new head of the CIA. And that's us in Paris, and then in the little inset back in, where were we? We weren't in, we were Newark. That was Newark. No, that was actually LaGuardia. That was LaGuardia. Anyway, we made it home. At the airport, we got greeted by our crew, and I apologize for anyone who decided that they would have preferred to come visit us also at the airport. We just didn't have the energy for more than our local crew, so we did. We're very happy to see them. That's what our front door looked like when we got home. We're almost done, guys. This little bear here was given us by Marilee Nason. That is Luxembourg bear. She has been to Luxembourg. She brought that bear back with her, and it's really just on loan to us. It's going to go back to Marilee at some point in the future. Now, I told you I was going to talk to you about potatoes in Maine. Turns out that a couple weeks ago, Bert went back up to Maine to retrieve a trailer that had been left there. And lo and behold, the major event of the year in Presque Isle, Maine was happening that weekend. That is the Presque Isle Potato Blossom Festival. And guess who got elected to be the Grand Marshal of the Potato Blossom Festival? That's Bert and Joni and Jason. And he really had wanted to turn around and start driving the 11 hours back to Bali as soon as he picked up the trailer. But this delayed him. I think he got back to Bali about 2 o'clock the next morning. But it was worth it. He said to be famous is worth it. So I think we're done. I apologize if I ran over. I really went a little long.